Good afternoon, everyone. This is Isabel with XYPN Live. I'm so excited to be here with Arielle Minicozzi. Minicozzi. I actually asked her how to pronounce her last name right before this, and of course I messed it up. So apologies, Arielle. But we're gonna give it a couple minutes here just to let everyone roll in. She did launch a poll. So if you attended XYPN Live, please do let us know. I'm certain it'll play into her presentation on automating workflows. So we're excited to see how that pans out. If you have any questions for her, please drop them in the Q&A panel at the bottom of your Zoom screen. She'll be sure to circle up and answer those. We're also recording this webinar, so for anyone who needs to sign off early or wants to make sure that they get any of the good material, that'll be in Mango Apps later today in the previously recorded webinars wiki. So I'll just go silent here for a minute, and then Arielle, whenever you're ready to get started, we'll let folks roll in for another minute or so, and then it's your show.
Thanks so much, Isabel. Yeah, we'll wait a little while, maybe 2 minutes or so. And while everybody comes in, if you want to go ahead and vote, I do have the poll live, as Isabel mentioned. I see a lot of people are already voting, so thanks so much. 87% of you have voted so far. Like Isabel said too, if you want to drop any questions in the Q&A, that would be great. I will take a break about 2/3 of the way through the presentation to stop for questions, and then I'll take a break at the end, answer some more questions if we have time, and then if anybody wants to email me after the webinar, my contact information will be in one of the last slides, and you can feel free to do that as well. I see some people are dropping comments in the chat. Hi, Gabriel. Hi, Trevor. Thanks so much. I'm excited too. And Jane, I see that you posted a question in the Q&A that you'd like to learn the process for taking notes during client meetings and post-meeting follow-up emails and summaries. I will cover both of those things during the webinar today, so stay tuned. Just going to give it one more minute to see if anybody else wants to drop on. Personally, I know I'm always late to webinars, so I appreciate it when people give a little bit more time in the beginning. It looks like almost everybody's voted at this point, 93%. So if anybody else wants to enter their answer, I'll give it to 1:05 my time, and then I'll just start jumping in. I'll end the poll and I'll jump in. Thanks, Angela. Chris, the poll it should be live. I'm not sure where it should show up in your screen. I'm just collecting a vote on who attended XYPN Live. Thank you, Frank. All right, guys, we're almost at 1:05 my time. I'm going to close down the poll in just a moment. All right, I'm going to end the poll. And so everybody, not everybody 100%, but most of you answered. 53% attended XYPN Live and 49% did not. So for those who didn't, definitely come next year. It was amazing. It was a really good opportunity to meet a lot of like-minded people, learn a lot, and just kind of network with everybody. For those who did, I'll get your thoughts on that in just a little bit and see what you thought. All right, so let me formally introduce myself. I'm Arielle Minicozzi from Sphinx Financial Planning, and today I am going to be talking about systematizing and automating your workflows. Before I get into the details, though, I want to talk about why systematizing is important. So, if anyone saw me during Michael Gerber's speech, I was furiously writing down notes. Just a disclaimer, and this is kind of where my poll comes in. I know a lot of people didn't like his presentation. I was actually warned by somebody, maybe you shouldn't include this slide, but regardless of how I thought his sales tactics were or what I thought of him personally, I thought that there were a couple key takeaways that he mentioned that were really applicable to what I'm going to talk about today. So I'll just read them off really quickly. He said, the preparation for scale begins at the very beginning. There is no point in going to acquisition unless you have built the system. You want to have a renewable process of continual improvement. Document what you did so you can replicate it. And the genius isn't your genius, it's the genius of the process. And I thought those were all really powerful, really applicable quotes for what I'm going to talk about today. So I'll share my agenda. I'm going to give you a brief overview of my background and how I came to automate my workflows. I'll show you my tech stack. I'll walk you through my consultation process, and then I'll take a brief break for questions. I'll walk you through my onboarding process, and then if we have time, I'll open the floor to another round of questions. As I mentioned earlier, at the end of the presentation, I'll give you a link where you can download the slides. And I also set up a 3-week mini course. It's 1 email each day for the course of 21 days. And it'll go into a little bit more detail about what I'm going to talk about today and kind of show you examples of how you can apply it to your own processes and your own system. And finally, my contact information will be at the end as well, so you can reach out to me by email, or you can set an appointment if you want to talk to me any further after the call. So one more thing before I begin, I know I took a poll already, but I have a couple questions I want you to consider as I go through my presentation. And I'll take another break when I take a break about 2/3 of the way through, I'll take another poll and see what you thought, but take a little time to consider it as I go through what I'm going to talk about. So how much time do you spend on the average plan? And of that time, how much is admin work versus client-facing work? Do you ever forget to follow up with prospects or wish you didn't have to spend so much time following up? And do you ever feel like you have to think about what comes next in the process versus it being automatic? So how did I get here? I was an art major in college. And after graduation, I did an internship at Wells Fargo and ended up staying there for 6 years as a loan officer. When I started my firm, I wanted to use my creativity and improve upon my experience with the mortgage process. I thought about the major obstacles I faced, and I decided the first thing I needed to do before I even pursued a single client was to make sure I systematized my processes. So I started out by listing my policies. These are the non-negotiables, the things I wanted to keep in mind very clearly as I was going through the process of creating my business. They are surprise and delight clients at every stage of the process and optimize their experience. Spend as little time on admin work as possible and as much time on meaningful client interaction as possible. Keep upfront costs low and grow my firm to profit so I can eventually hire other advisors at a living wage and find and retain more of the best fit clients. We talk a lot about niching here at XYPN, and for good reason. I would strongly suggest if you don't already have a niche, you try to settle on one before you begin systematizing your workflows, because if you have several different types of clients you work with, it's going to be much harder to systematize and automate your processes than if you have only one target audience. You can always go back and add another process for a different target, and you can always go back and modify it as well. But I think starting out with one target audience in mind is a lot easier than trying to do it all at once. So after identifying my policies, I listed out my main pain points. For me, they were not having a good system in place to track my progress, retyping the same emails over and over and over again, finding time to nurture leads without neglecting paying clients, and wasting time on administrative tasks that could be spent on meaningful client interaction. As you can see, these tie pretty closely into the policies that I talked about in the previous slide. So I'm going to put up another poll in one moment here. And there we go. So I want to ask, how many of you have workflows right now for your processes? The question says every process, but I think just processes in general is a pretty good gauge of what we're going to talk about. So as you guys answer, I'll just keep going. So to address my first concern, and before I could address the other concerns I had, like I mentioned, I decided I needed to systematize my own processes. So first, I listed every step in the client lifecycle from the time of the first interaction to the time the financial plan is presented and beyond. I would say thinking about the first year of a client's life cycle, so to speak, would probably be ideal. I didn't have an existing process in place because I wasn't coming from the RIA world. It was a brand new firm and I was new to financial planning. So I used the mortgage application process as a starting point, and then I modified it to apply to financial planning. When you do this, I suggest either using a pencil or eraser or typing it up in a Word document so you can go back and make corrections after the fact. You probably will want to tweak it. So having an easily editable format is really important. And if you're like me, you'll probably find that mapping out your process is a huge undertaking, but it alone addresses many of your pain points. So going back to the poll, I see so far 87% of you have voted, and of those people, 27% have a process and 73% don't. So hopefully this is helpful to you hopefully this is helpful for the good majority of people that don't have a process already in place. So next, I identified the major transition points of the process. For me, these were the initial consultation, the onboarding meeting, the plan creation meetings, I have several, and the final plan presentation meeting. Once you create these categories, you'll want to name them something relevant like leads, prospects, and clients, so you can establish a way to track them through your marketing funnel. And then I created a more formal workflow chart using a program called draw.io. I will show you what that looks like a little bit later, and I'll also list it in the suggested technology slide at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and close down the poll. Final count is 28% for yes, you have a process in place, and 72% for no. So for the 72%, keep watching. Okay, and I see somebody put something in the chat. Did I move forward on my slides? Can you all see the slides? Can you let me know? I'm going to move on to the next slide, which says address other pain points on the top. If somebody can just type in the chat and let me know if you can see that, that'd be great. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so after I had a rough draft of my workflow in place, I worked on addressing the other pain points. What I did was I created templates for common communications like call agendas, thank you emails, follow-up emails, and FAQs. If you already have a client base, I suggest going back through your prior client communications and seeing which information you're sending over and over again. Don't worry, again, you probably will need to go back and edit it, but you absolutely can do that. Once you get more experience with your process, you'll be able to see what's working and what's not and go back and refine it. So next, I created a schedule for following up with contacts at each stage of the process, including when to give up on actively communicating with them and let them go into what Kristen Harrod refers to as prospect purgatory. I decided to use a mix of calls, texts, and emails, but whatever works for you is totally fine, and that will really depend on your client base. If you're working with younger clients, texting and emailing is probably good. If you're working with older clients, many of them will probably prefer a phone call. So again, whatever works is okay. It'll fit into the process just fine. Finally, I picked out areas where I could potentially use technology to automate instead of having to spend time doing everything myself. I spent the next 6 months researching and refining my process until I was happy with the fundamentals. And I still refine things every now and then, but for the most part, my system runs itself. So before we jump into the next section and take a look at my actual workflow, let me quickly show you my tech stack. This is not all inclusive, but these are the programs that do the majority of the work. There are alternatives to each program I've listed here. So if you use something different than what I have, that doesn't mean that you can't continue with the process of automating. You might have to do a little bit of workaround, but it's definitely possible. A lot of other programs do work together with the ones that I've listed. But the reason I chose these particular programs, going back to my policies, is because I wanted to use ones that would allow me to do everything I needed for as cheap or free if possible, and also still ensure a quality experience for the client and myself. Some of these programs sync directly with each other. Some of them need to use Zapier as an automator, and that's the last one listed at the bottom. The nice thing about all the solutions I've implemented as well is that you can start with a few and then add on as your need grows. Right now, just to give you a little bit of an example, the only program on this list, or programs rather, on this list that I pay for are Calendly, which is $8 a month, and Process Street, which is $15 a month. The next upgrade I'll probably do is Zapier, which is $20 a month for 20 zaps, and that should be more than enough considering I only use 5 right now. So here's a snapshot of my personal workflow in Draw.io. As I mentioned earlier, I broke out the process by major events, which are listed in purple, and then I categorized each section of the process into stages. I have a segment I call warm leads, and these are leads that have scheduled a consultation. That's what you see right here. I also have a segment I call cold leads, which I haven't shown, and these are leads with which I've had no direct contact, but that have engaged with my website or my social media. Next, I have prospects, which are leads that have signed up for a Get Organized meeting, which I use as, I call it Consultation 2.0. It's an optional second part of my consultation process. And we'll talk about why I do that in a little bit. And finally, I have clients, which is pretty self-explanatory. So I'm going to dive in deep into the warm leads process. And I see that there are a couple questions. Stop yelling, okay? Am I talking too loud? And Jane, this should hopefully help with your question that you asked earlier about the process for taking notes during meetings and post-meeting follow-ups, so I'll touch on that. Okay, so first the lead signs up for a consultation on my Calendly, and if you use another scheduling software, again, that's totally fine. This same workflow will apply for you. My Calendly link is featured on my website in several places, and it's also on my social media, my XYPN and NAPFA profiles, and anywhere else a lead might potentially find my information. Instead of having to go back and forth by phone or email to find a day and time that works for everyone, they simply go to my branded login page, pick a day, pick a time, enter their data, and schedule the event. This is the first point of data entry that carries through the rest of the process. And using Zapier, you can pass this data to other applications, which I'll show you in a moment. On the confirmation screen that comes up after they've booked the event, there is a link to pre-consultation questionnaire that I've created in JotForm. The link is also included in the confirmation email in case they don't see it at the bottom of this confirmation page, and it's included in the event reminders that go out 24 hours, 2 hours, and 15 minutes in advance of every call. Once they fill out the pre-consultation questionnaire, JotForm sends them a summary email. It looks like this. I've coded it to look how I want it, and you can do the same for your own branding. And the question is mostly qualitative questions about values, feelings, versus quantitative questions like what is your income or what kind of documentation do you have. Parallel to that process, Zapier will send the client data that was entered into Calendly to Wealthbox and create a new contact, to Process Street and create a new workflow, and to MailChimp to start an email campaign. I've set up Process Street to notify me once the workflow is created. And if you have multiple advisors within your firm, or if you have admins, you can actually set up the workflow to automatically assign individual tasks to the correct person or people. So if there are different people that need to do different steps in each workflow, you can have it automatically send them those notifications individually. You can also set it up to send you task reminders, and that too can be automatic or manual. So here's what my consultation workflow looks like in Process Street. And like I mentioned, Zapier will send the name and email address right into the workflow from Calendly, as well as the partner's name and email address if it's a joint call. I also have it pass other data like the lead's phone number and their physical address if they've put it in Calendly. It's an optional question. And that way I can send them a welcome packet if they've put it in. I like to review everything before I actually speak to them just to make sure it's all correct. I might send them a confirmation email just to make sure their email address works and ask them if everything looks good. 48 hours before the call occurs, MailChimp sends out an email that looks just like this, asking the lead to think about what they want to get out of the call. It's just another gentle reminder of our meeting, and it streamlines the time I spend speaking with the client on the phone. Just to give you a little hint about how this can help you, since I started sending this email, I've reduced the average time each consultation takes me from about 45 minutes to an average of 25 minutes. And where it says, hi, test first name, that's just because this is a test email. The individual client's name will populate there before it actually sends out the email to them. 24 hours before the call, the lead receives the call agenda, and it looks like this. And I've also set up a call agenda for myself in Process Street that I use as a guide during the call, so I hit all the important points and don't forget to talk about something that I need to talk about. I also have a section, going back to the question in the Q&A, where I can type notes as I'm on the call, and that way I don't have to transfer them from a piece of paper to the computer or from Word or anywhere else that I might be typing them later on. And if you want to, this is actually something you can set up to automatically transfer into Wealthbox. I don't have it set up like that simply because, again, I'm on the free version of Zapier right now, so I'm trying to prioritize my Zaps. But if that's something that you find yourself doing a lot of, you can easily set it up to automatically pass this data right into the Wealthbox contact. This is, I see a question in the chat. So we are looking at Process Street right now, and that's the workflow software that I use. And again, it's in the tech stack slide as well. So one of the best things you can do to prevent drop-off is to have the lead verbally agree to the next step at each stage of the process. So therefore, the last two tasks on the agenda, or the last three tasks, I should say, are to ask for the commitment. If they're not ready to move ahead, ask them why and find out if we can encourage them to move ahead. And if they still aren't committed, I want to try to get them to schedule that Get Organized meeting, again, the consultation 2.0. That way I can walk them through the planning software, answer any lingering questions that they have, and it's just another more sticky, so to speak, touch that I have so that they're more encouraged to move ahead with me instead of just forgetting about moving ahead or going to find another advisor. After every consultation, whether or not they decide to move ahead, I always complete two tasks. I send them a thank you email with a summary of our call, and I add them to my newsletter list. The lead's email address and the partner email address, if it's a joint call, pre-populate to the email template, and I've also preset the email to blind CC to Wealthbox. And I see a question in the chat, how come you use this rather than the workflows in Wealthbox? I find it to be more robust. A lot of the things that I'm talking about right now, or we'll talk about in a second, you can't do in Wealthbox. And so it is a little bit annoying for some people to have an outside program they use, but I find it suits my needs a lot better than the workflows in Wealthbox do. So the framework of the email, and going back to that question, this is a perfect example of something you cannot yet do in Wealthbox. The framework of the email, I have it already set up, and I have a combination of drop-down and short entry fields that I can use to customize it to the particular client situation. So when I talk to other advisors, a question that frequently comes up is, or I guess an objection that frequently comes up is, I don't want to automate because it takes away that personal touch from my interaction with my clients. And I just want to point out that I am not in favor of taking away the personal touch at all. There definitely needs to be some client interaction, some personalization to your process. And in fact, that's why I think automation is important, because it allows you to spend less time on these non-personal communications and take that time and use it to have personal communication with your clients. So this email itself is sort of a marriage between the personal contact and the automation. The template is there, the framework is there, but the details, you can fill them in by hand. And in fact, once you get to the bottom, if you were to scroll to the bottom of the screen, there's a send button. Once you hit it, it will open up the email in my email client, which is Gmail. For you, that could be Outlook or Hotmail or whatever the case may be, and further edit it before you actually send it. I have formatting notes built into the template, so I know where to make things bold or where to indent. And you can even take that template, and if it's a one-off situation, just disregard it and just send a manual email. So there are definitely ways to get around the fact that not every situation is cookie cutter, not every situation fits cleanly into this process. There are going to be situations where you need one-off changes, and this allows you to do that. So after the consultation, there are 3 possible paths a prospect could take. Path A, which is least desirable, is that they don't agree to do anything yet. And that is the last row across the bottom. If they're not ready to sign on, but they are still engaged, I offer them path B, which again is that get organized meeting. And I'll answer their questions, I'll walk them through Right Capital, and I'll try and encourage them to overcome any objections that they might have about moving ahead. And then path C, which is the ideal option, is that they agree to sign on, skip go, and collect $500. Once I send the manual summary email and I check off that task in process street, I have Zapier update MailChimp to send out the next email. If they don't agree to do anything, they'll receive this email, which is a summary of the next steps, asking them to schedule a Get Organized meeting. After that email, they'll receive 3 tip emails spaced out over the course of a week and a half. And at the bottom of each email in this series is a call to action button, again, asking them to schedule the Get Organized meeting. My goal at every step of the process is to just get them to move ahead to the next step. If they want to skip ahead and move on to signing on right away, that's fantastic, that's great. But if they don't, there's a process in place to handle that. Between the automated follow-up emails, again, are 3 call or text follow-ups. Going back to that personal interaction, it is very important. So I don't want to just send them automated emails. I do want to have a personalized dialogue with them. And again, you can set up, like I have, email reminders in Process Street, and you can assign the follow-ups to the appropriate advisor or your admin if it's not going to be you that's going to be doing those follow-ups, but you are going to be completing the rest of the workflow. You can still individually assign those follow-ups to somebody else. And I've set up my notes so that the main objectives that I included in the summary email that I sent to them earlier pass through to this screen, so I don't have to go to a different place to find what I need when I'm on the call with them. And there's also a section under each follow-up task for notes during the call. So in case you don't get them to move ahead, in case you want to jot down notes on the conversation you're having, or if you need to leave a message, you can type the notes in that box right below the follow-up. And those notes will pass on then to the next follow-up and the next until the last. And then if at any point they decide to move ahead, all the notes from every single section I've set up so that they actually pass through to the next workflow automatically. Again, the goal is really meaningful interaction. So if they aren't convinced to sign on after the consultation, hopefully they are, and hopefully they haven't got any major objections, but this gives me another chance to just show value, overcome those objections, and answer their questions in real time. And then finally, if I still haven't been able to get them to commit, or if I haven't been able to reach them at all, then they'll receive a 1-question survey 15 days after the consultation asking them why they're not ready to move ahead yet. And I see Cindy in the comment, yes, that was still Process Street that I was looking at in the previous slide. The survey looks like this, and all they have to do is click on the appropriate answer, and that makes it quick and simple for them to complete it, and thus increases the likelihood that they'll actually do it. This information can then be used to set up an automated response to their objection. So if you have a template for a response, if somebody says, I'm too busy to work with you, you can set it up to send that automatically. Or if you want to, again, have that personal interaction with them, you can just use this to inform the call or the next follow-up that you're having with them, inform why they aren't ready to move ahead, and just use that to go off of, to overcome their objections, so to speak. So at this point, even if they decide not to move on, I've still received some value from their no, because I can use their objection to improve my process for future leads. And then if at the end they're not ready to sign on yet, but they've agreed to schedule a Get Organized meeting, they receive a different message from MailChimp, and it looks like this. And then later on, they'll get another set of pre-meeting emails, just like they did with the initial consultation. That'll be the questions I want them to contemplate before the call and the call agenda. I'll skip over the details of that for my presentation just because it's very similar to the consultation process, and I want to leave time to talk about my onboarding process. And so then finally, if they've indicated right at the time of the consultation that they're ready to become a client immediately, they skip ahead to the client segment and they receive this message. It has links to all the next steps that they need to complete, so that, again, everything is all in one place. They can simply click the appropriate link and do what they need to do with as little hassle as possible. So going back quickly to the questions I asked at the beginning, now that you've had the chance to think about your answers, I'm going to open up the next poll. And what I wanted to know is, how much time on average does it take you to handle each consultation? I will point out that this entire process takes me on average no more than an hour for each client. That's including 25 to 30 minutes of time speaking to them during the consultation itself, 5 to 10 minutes putting together and mailing their welcome packet, 5 minutes composing and formatting the summary email, and 5 to 10 minutes calling or texting them to follow up. Compare that to the hour and a half to 2 hours it used to take me with mortgage clients, and you can see that the time savings is already significant. And looking at the answers in the poll, I see that 50%, so the majority of you say, okay, now it's going down a little bit, but 48% now say that it takes you about 1 to 2 hours to do the initial consultation. And question in the chat, I'll answer a couple of those later, but to answer Tyler's question, for the initial consultation process, so from the time you first speak to the client and have that consultation call to the time that you either get a commitment from them or they say that they're not going to move ahead. So I'll give it one more minute for votes to come in. So it looks like right now we're at 15% of you are less than an hour, about 50% 1 to 2 hours, 18% 2 to 3 hours, 11% 3 to 4 hours, 5% 4 to 5 hours, and 2% at 5+ hours. I wonder if those of you that said 4 to 5 or more hours, are you considering other parts of the process, or are you really just looking at the consultation process? All right, perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And then one more question for you. Of those people that said longer than an hour, how many of you want to reduce the time that you're spending on each consultation? And again, this is just the consultation itself, not the actual client plan creation or the onboarding meeting or anything else. Okay, a whopping 94% so far. That was really, really quick, yes. Perfect. So while everybody answers that poll question, let me then go to the other questions in the chat and the Q&A. I'll pause for about 10 minutes if it even takes that long. I don't think there are a ton of questions right now. And like I said too, I'll leave more time at the end for additional questions if you think of anything after the fact. So in the chat, do you find that prospects feel annoyed by the various emails, or are they generally okay with them? To answer that question, let me go back to my workflow. And no, the simple answer is no, most people are not annoyed by the emails. And the reason for that is not every single person gets all these emails. So going back to the warm leads after I've had the consultation call with them, they'll get the standard emails from Calendly with the appointment reminders and confirmation. That usually is just something everybody kind of expects. They'll get the pre-call questions and the call agenda prior to the call. And then if they decide at that consultation to move on to the next step and sign on and become a client, they don't get any of these follow-up emails that at the bottom row, the next steps, the tips, etc. They only get those if I haven't heard back from them, or if they haven't agreed to move on as a client, or to schedule that get organized meeting, or haven't just said no right off the bat. I mean, there are a lot of people that I talk to that I either think they're not a good fit for me, or we discovered during the consultation that we don't want to work together for whatever reason. And in that case as well, they will not get these emails. They'll only get these emails if they tell me, I think I'm interested in moving ahead, but I'm not ready to commit to setting up the next meeting in the process. Next question, do you have problems with people knowing exactly what they should be sending you? We have problems with our clients getting their documentation back to us. To answer that question, let me go back to the next steps email that they will get if and when they agree to sign on. So I know exactly what you're saying, because again, when I was in the mortgage industry, I had that exact problem. People never knew what the very next thing they needed to do was, what they needed to send me. I have all the next steps listed out in this email with links right there that they can use to click and just go exactly to where they need to be. As far as documentation is concerned, I've created a documentation needs list generator in Jotform. I don't talk about it during this presentation, but feel free to schedule a call with me after the presentation's over, and I can show you what that looks like. If enough people are interested, I am intending to create additional courses. So if enough people want to see that, I can get a course together on that exact topic. Is the poll just for the intro? Okay, answered that. Do I use Zoom meeting for initial consultations and ongoing meetings? Yes, I do. So for the initial consultation, a lot of people prefer to talk just on the phone rather than by Zoom. So I do a lot of phone calls in the very beginning stages. For the remaining meetings, most people do want to switch over to Zoom. I don't do any in-person meetings. Everything is 100% virtual. Can I show my client workflow again? I found that prospects and leads are much easier to create workflows for compared to clients. You are 100% right about that, Robert. I will show the client workflow in the next section of the call, so bear with me. And after the call is over, you can download the slides. If you need additional information that is not included here, or that there's something that you want to specifically talk about, again, let me know. I'm more than happy to talk in more detail later. What parts of my process incorporate with Wealthbox? Are emails copied into Wealthbox for referencing? So yes, any email that I send automatically or otherwise, is just my BCC for Wealthbox is always incorporated into that message. I don't specifically talk about that either during this presentation, but after the call, if you use the link in the last slide to sign up to receive the slides and get that mini course, that is something I talk about during the mini course. So you can learn how to do that. And again, if you need help, just let me know. I see the benefit of a prospect being able to use Calendly. Do you see your clients still using it? Yes, all of my clients use Calendly. I will oftentimes go in and schedule a meeting on their behalf. If let's say we're in the consultation and they tell me they're ready to move on to the next step and become a client, I'll schedule their onboarding meeting right then and there with them. If they want to move on to the Get Organized meeting, same thing. I just go in and do it for them so they don't have to do it. But it's nice so that they still get those reminders and remember when our meeting is scheduled. Okay, perfect. So let me go over to the actual Q&A now. So Cademon, I'm sorry if I'm not saying your name right. Can I say why I like Process Street versus using the workflow that's in Wealthbox? So yes, again, and I see a similar question from Adam. Yes, I like Process Street because it's a little more robust. So like I mentioned earlier, the email process that I showed you with the email template, the assigning of tasks to individuals, the getting those email reminders on a repeating basis, all those things are things that you can't right now do in Wealthbox. I looked at using their workflows initially, but I've just found that Process Street is more robust. That being said, depending on your own particular needs, you can do some automations with the Wealthbox workflows now using Zapier. You're not going to have as much functionality, but if you don't need it, then using the workflows in Wealthbox are not a bad idea. I personally I like the additional functionality I get from Process Street. Can the notes be fed through to Wealthbox? Yes, they can. I can show you after the call how to do that. You can feel free to set up a call with me later. How am I handling that link directly to their agreement to sign from the email? Oh, okay. I think I know what you're asking. How am I getting them their agreement via the link? And how am I making sure that it includes their actual information? I'm going to talk about that in the next section of the presentation. Since the emails come from MailChimp, do you find any of your prospects have these emails go to spam? I haven't had that problem, but I do let them know that they are going to be getting some emails from my automated process and let them know to keep an eye out for that in their spam box so that they don't go there just in case. And then why do I use MailChimp for templated emails rather than G Suite? I like the look and feel, and I also find that setting up the day and time that I want the emails to go out and the triggers that I want to set off those emails is a lot simpler in MailChimp. Not that MailChimp is simple by any means, but it's a lot easier in my opinion than using email rules in G Suite or Outlook or those kind of things. There are ways you can do it, but I just find that number one, that part is easier, and like you mentioned, number two, I like the way that you can customize how it looks more so than you can with a regular email. And I also think it's important to distinguish for my clients what emails are automated and what emails are not. So having these automated emails have a similar look and feel to them tells them that these are automated messages. They're not coming directly from me. That might or might not be important, but I think it's kind of nice just to give them the distinguishing factor. And then last questions, and then we'll move ahead. So let's see. What was the question you asked pre-consultation that shortened the prospect meeting? So I asked 3 questions, and I'll go back to that email. And it's this. So I asked them, what are their 3 most pressing financial concerns? What are your 3 most important values or goals, and whether there's 1 or 2 areas where they need help or if they're looking for broad assistance. I found that when I asked these questions during the consultation, I was getting people who weren't really sure the answers to them. And they would either take the time while we were on the call to think about it, or they would have to set up another call after the initial consultation to answer those additional questions. So I found that asking them ahead of time, 2 days ahead, is really good because it gives them time to think about it before we move on to the actual call itself. That way they've had time to process their thoughts. They're not so under pressure where I'm asking them something, they have to kind of just come up with it right then and there. And do I credit the question shortened it or the whole process? I think it's really the questions, because a lot of this process I already had in place before I started sending this email with the questions in it. I think, again, just the fact that I'm not putting them on the spot, asking these pretty deep probing questions during the call and not giving them a chance to think about it has really streamlined our conversation. Templates are stored in MailChimp for these emails. The pseudo manual emails that I send are stored in Process Street. And the framework for that is right there, and then I just send it right from Process Street. Process Street has forms, Jot forms. Okay, so Process Street has forms, but it's more forms to set up a workflow. So if you send a client the workflow in Process Street, you're not really getting the same functionality as you are in Jot forms. We can probably talk about that after the call. It's a little bit complicated to explain, but essentially Jot forms is just a questionnaire, whereas Process Street, if you send them it, they see everything that you have on your back end. So you don't probably really want them to see your own workflow. And then last but not least, did you say that you're able to BCC from MailChimp? Not directly, but I have set up a rule in my email that sends out any copies of any emails from MailChimp that are going to my clients to go to Wealthbox. Okay, so let's move on, and I'm gonna close out the poll. So 93% of you said you want to reduce the time you're spending on a consultation. So hopefully this is gonna be helpful. And I would again encourage you to sign up for the mini course at the end. Let me go back to where I was. Okay. And we'll move on then to the onboarding process. And if anybody has any questions, I think we should have a little bit of time at the end to talk about them. If not, again, feel free to email me or set up a call after the presentation. So the onboarding process starts as soon as the client indicates they'd like to sign on, whether or not they've had a Get Organized meeting, whether or not they've received any of those follow-up emails, they'll trigger this client process. There's an option in my consultation workflow and the Get Organized workflow to create the onboarding workflow with a single click. And that's not something that I talk about in this presentation because showing you that would be a little bit involved. But like with the other questions, if there's enough interest in that, I can set up a mini course on that process. So once I generate the first invoice in Advice Pay, I check off the task in Process Street that I've set up the billing, and Zapier updates the status in MailChimp to start sending out the next series of emails. At XYPN Live, I spoke to the developers at Advice Pay, and they've assured me that they're working on a Zapier integration. Please, 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 I'm so excited about that. Because right now I have to send the invoices manually, but once that's in place, I can set it up so that once I check off this box, the invoice generates on its own using data that's already in Process Street to say the amount and the dates, etc., rather than having to manually create it. The first email they receive once they decide to become a client is this one, which I showed you a little bit earlier. When they click on the link that says Create Your Sphinx Financial Planning Account, it takes them to my branded Right Capital sign-up page. And doing that is one of the emails in the mini course. So if that's something you're interested in doing, definitely check it out. After they create their account, link their bank accounts, and upload their documents, they click the link for the Plan Picker questionnaire, and that allows them to select which plan they want. Once that's submitted, JotForm will automatically redirect them to the engagement letter, which they can e-sign, and from there, they're sent back to Right Capital in case they haven't already uploaded their documents or linked their accounts. And I will show you a recording of what that looks like, because I don't like typing live, I always mess up. So the client will hit start, and they'll pick whether it's a joint or individual plan. They'll enter the date of birth, their name, email address, physical address, and then pick which type of plan they want. And depending on the type of plan they pick, there might be additional add-ons. So for example, if they choose a complex plan, they can pick between student loans or primary residence purchase as their add-on. And this can be customized and tailored to your own personal services and products that you offer. I don't do any investment advising, so that's not an option for me. But if you do, I have other processes in place to handle that, sending the IPS and the advisory agreement and those kind of things as well. So once they hit submit, they can edit the form as you just saw. And then you'll see that the name, the address, the scope of the plan have all passed through from that plan picker questionnaire right into this contract, so to speak. The fees have populated, as well as the receipt date for the ADV. And once they scroll to the bottom, they can e-sign it right within the form. I'll show you that. There you go. And once they hit submit, they'll be automatically redirected to the confirmation page, which has a link to Right Capital. And once they click it, it'll bring them right to my branded Right Capital login page, where they can continue to update their account or upload their documentation as needed. So going back just a little bit, submitting that plan picker questionnaire is what triggers them to receive a confirmation email with my firm's ADV attached. So in the video, I showed how the ADV receipt date pre-populated to that contract. That's where this comes from. So if they submit that plan picker and they don't go ahead and sign the contract, if they close out the window, it'll save everything. And there's a link right at the bottom where it says engagement letter in pink that they can click, and it will bring them right to that pre-filled engagement letter that they can continue signing whenever they're ready. But because it's quick, most people just go right from step A to step B and then on to Right Capital. Once they sign the engagement letter, they receive this email with a copy of the signed engagement letter and the firm's privacy policy attached. And again, all these emails are being BCC'd to Wealthbox for tracking purposes, and Message Watcher is also capturing them in my email outbox. Here's a preview of what the client engagement letter actually looks like. It's branded with my firm's logo across the top. And then finally, once the client makes the first payment, they receive this message with a link to schedule their onboarding call. Again, just trying to guide them what is the very next step at each stage so they know what they need to do. And that's all I have for you. Let me do one more thing before I open the floor back up to questions. There's a link on this slide where you can download a copy of the actual slides themselves. And again, once you sign up, you'll also get access to that 3-week mini course, one tip every day for 21 days on a little bit more detail of what I've talked about during this presentation. If you have any other questions, if there's something I don't cover that you wanted to ask me about, or if you just want to schedule a time to meet with me, my contact information is at the bottom of the slide as well. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and take some more questions now, and I hope you all have a very good day. Thanks so much. So Q&A, let's see. The program the engagement letter is generated in is called JotForm, and again, that's also on the tech stack slide, so you can go back and access it. I don't cover that in the course either, so again, if you want more details or if you need additional help, let me know, and I will talk to you about that after the presentation. Let's see over in the chat. Okay, let's see. never mind. Where is this found? What software is this? Okay, so I'm assuming you're talking about the questionnaire. The software for that is JotForm. And that allows you to create questionnaires, forms, calculators, etc., using conditional logic. It's very similar to Google Forms, but again, a little bit more robust. Do I DocuSign? No, I don't use DocuSign, but you can integrate this with DocuSign. So JotForm has a widget you can use on your forms, and what will happen is it'll take the pre-populated letter or contract, and it'll bring it right over into DocuSign, and you can have them sign through DocuSign. Yes, the link is case sensitive, so make sure that when you're typing in XYPN and the automation webinar, that the A and the W and the XYPN are capitalized. Zapier, one more time what it does. Zapier basically is a mediator between different programs. It allows different softwares to talk to each other so that doing something in one program can trigger another action in a different program. When I send the signed engagement letter and privacy policy, is this automatic on MailChimp as well? No, the emails that are sending out from that are not in MailChimp. They are actually being sent out right from JotForm. So JotForm has its own internal email functionality, and that way I don't have to use Zaps. You can send it out through MailChimp if you want to using Zapier, but there's internal functionality that integrates with JotForm, so I use that. Do I use a standardized engagement letter? If so, do I include AUM language in the letter, even if for hourly and planning clients? So I use the engagement letter that the CFP board created. You can get that on the CFP board website. And I do not do any asset management, so I don't include AUM language, but I have a couple other advisors that I've worked with that do AUM. And for them, I've set up something a little bit differently so that data will actually pull through into not just the standard contract, but it'll also pull through to their investment policy statement, as well as an asset management agreement, a separate asset management agreement, or you can include it all in the same contract if you wanted to do that. Let's see if there's any other questions in the Q&A. The client engagement letter is generated in JotForm. I think I answered that already. Where can you access the slides? So you can use the link that's right here on the middle of the slide, the bit.ly/XYPN automation webinar. Make sure XYPN and the A and the W for automation webinar are all capital, otherwise it will not take you there. Sorry about that, guys. I probably should have thought about that before I made it that. I'll give it a minute and see if there are any other questions. We've got about 2 minutes left. My welcome package. So yes, that's a great question. My welcome package I created using moo.com. If you haven't already gotten your collateral through them, I would really suggest it. They're a little more expensive than Vistaprint, but the quality is fantastic. And I have an FAQ sheet. So FAQs that are commonly asked with answers to them. That way they don't have to find it on my website or ask me about it. I have a proposed timeline for the financial planning process, not necessarily dates, but step-by-step guide to what the financial planning process entails. Because a lot of my clients are younger, they're millennials, and they've never worked with a financial advisor or financial planner before. Oftentimes my battle is not convincing them to work with me over another advisor, but rather convincing them that they need financial planning to begin with and explaining to them what financial planning actually means. So that's included in there. I also have stickers that I've printed up with my logo, and I give them a sheet of 4 so they can share them with their friends, hopefully. And last but not least, I include a little packet of catnip seeds because my brand is Sphinx Financial and my joke tagline is financial planning for cat people. I put a little note that says I would have included a whole cat if I could fit it, but hopefully this is the second best thing. So just a little bit of joking humor. My brand is not so formal as other people's are. It's supposed to be lighthearted and kind of funny. So I try and keep that continuing throughout every interaction with my clients. Thank you. All right, so we're at 2 o'clock my time. We're on the hour, so I think that I'll turn it back over to Isabel. If anybody has any other questions, like I said, feel free to email me, set an appointment. I'm more than happy to talk to you all after the fact. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to go through this with me. I really appreciate your attention and your patience.
Thank you so much, Arielle. That was fantastic. I'm sure a lot of us are going to be going back and reevaluating some of the processes we do. So, as Arielle mentioned, this is her contact information. She's doing us a real solid by being available. So, thank you for that time, the time you spent today and the time you're going to spend when people reach out to you with questions. We did record this webinar. Her slides are available there at that link, but if you want to rewatch the webinar, it's going to be in the member forums under previously recorded webinars wiki. If you're not sure where to find that, you can ask your member experience specialist. But other than that, everyone have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday afternoon. Thanks.